The only truth at 10,000 feet is the engine. Everything else, the sky, the ground, the war, it's all decoration. But the engine, the Klimov VK-105, that is the heart, and like any heart, it can break. I always knew this. Before I ever touched the controls of a Yakovlev, my hands were deep in the grease and grime of truck engines back in Sverdlovsk. My father taught me that a machine talks to you. You just have to be quiet enough to listen. A slight vibration in the chassis, a change in the pitch of the exhaust, a hesitation in the turnover, these were words, warnings. When the party sent me to flight school, they saw a pilot. I saw myself as a mechanic with wings. This morning, the air over Poland tasted of frozen mud and diesel. It was the spring of '45. We could all feel it, the final act. Berlin was just over the horizon, a foul beast waiting for the final spear thrust. We were the tip of that spear. The Ninth Guards, but the beast was still thrashing, its claws still sharp. The skies over the Oder River were thick with flak, a garden of black blossoms that bloomed without warning. My Yak-3 was not just another plane on the line. It was mine, serial number 17. I knew every rivet, every patch. I'd spent more hours with my head inside its cowling than I had sleeping. The ground crew were good lads, but they had a dozen planes to worry about. I only had one. I'd regapped the spark plugs myself the night before, checked the magneto timing until it was perfect. She purred, a deep, healthy, powerful sound that vibrated right up the stick and into my soul. My fear was never of a Messerschmitt on my tail. A dogfight is a conversation, a deadly one, but a conversation nonetheless. You can react, you can outthink, you can outfly. My terror, the one that lived in the cold pit of my stomach, was silence. The sudden, catastrophic silence that meant the conversation between me and my engine was over. The failure of a part I hadn't checked, a stress fracture I couldn't see, a single, malevolent piece of shrapnel in the wrong place. That was the ghost that haunted me. The mission was simple, they said. The simple ones are always the worst. A low-level photo reconnaissance run straight across the Silo Heights. Marshal Zhukov needed to know exactly where the Germans had dug in their 88s. An entire armored offensive was waiting for my pictures. No escort. Go in low, go in fast, and get out. Simple. I strapped in, the worn leather of the cockpit smelling of oil and sweat. My home. I went through the checklist, my fingers finding each switch by memory. My eyes weren't just reading the gauges. They were studying them, oil pressure steady, coolant temperature rising slowly, correctly. I gave a thumbs up to my crew chief, a young boy from Minsk who looked far too thin for his uniform. He smiled, a flash of white in a grime-streaked face, and pulled the chocks. The takeoff was clean. The Yak leapt into the air, eager. She was a beautiful machine, light and powerful. Below me, our airfield was a hive of activity, trucks and men moving with the desperate energy that comes at the end of a long, brutal war. We were all so close. I turned east, towards the German lines, the morning sun glinting off my canopy. The ground below was a corpse. Cratered fields, skeletal forests, the black ruins of villages. 4 years of this. 4 years of pushing them back from the gates of Moscow to their own doorstep. My home in Sverdlovsk seemed like a dream from another man's life. This reality of churned earth and burning metal was all I knew now. I dropped lower as I crossed the Oder. 500 feet. The river was a sluggish gray ribbon. Then 300. The camera mounted in the fuselage was running, its gentle clicking a counterpoint to the engine's roar. I could see the German trenches now, zigzagging scars on the landscape. I banked, lining up for my first pass, my eyes scanning, my mind cataloging. An anti-tank ditch there. A cluster of what looked like camouflaged artillery positions in that copse of trees. This was the intelligence that would save our boys in the T-34s. And then the world erupted in black puffs of smoke. Flak, the 88s, they had been waiting. The plane bucked and shuddered as shells burst around me. It was like flying through a hailstorm of sledgehammers. Shrapnel pinged off the fuselage like angry wasps. I pushed the throttle forward, weaving, jinking, making myself the hardest target I could be. Another pass. I needed the pictures. I gritted my teeth, my knuckles white on the stick. The camera clicked on. More black flowers bloomed around me. One burst was closer, too close. The plane jolted violently, a sickening lurch that threw me against my straps. A sound like a giant tearing a sheet of metal in half. And then a smell, the hot, acrid smell of burning oil. My eyes snapped to the gauges. The needle on the oil pressure gauge was falling, plummeting. My heart tried to climb out of my throat. This was it, the ghost was here. A spray of black liquid smeared across my windscreen. The engine note changed. The deep, healthy roar faltered, becoming a ragged, percussive coughing. It was choking, starving. I knew exactly what had happened. A piece of shrapnel had torn through the oil cooler or a primary line. The lifeblood of my engine was venting into the cold Polish air. Standard procedure was to bail out. Get clear before the engine seized and the plane became a 5-ton coffin. I was over enemy territory. I'd be captured or killed. The film with the German positions would be lost. The tank crews waiting for my report would drive into a perfectly laid trap, hundreds of them, maybe thousands. I could hear my instructor's voice in my head. A pilot's first duty is to his own life. But I could also hear my father. Listen to the machine, Dmitri, it will tell you what it needs. I pulled back on the throttle, easing the strain. The coughing grew worse. The whole airframe was vibrating now, a deep, bone-jarring shudder. The stick felt loose in my hand. I was flying a dying animal, but it wasn't dead yet. My mind, the mechanic's mind, took over. The pilot was just a passenger now. Oil pressure near zero. That meant catastrophic friction. The pistons would expand, scrape, and finally weld themselves to the cylinder walls in a final, fiery seizure. But how long did I have? A minute, two, not long enough to get back, unless I could cool it, reduce the friction. The only thing I controlled was the fuel mixture and the propeller pitch. Desperate thoughts raced through my head, theories I'd argued with other mechanics over cheap vodka, things you would never, ever do in a healthy aircraft. I pushed the mixture control to full rich, drown it in fuel. The fuel would act as a coolant, a lubricant of last resort. It was horribly inefficient, a fool's hope. The engine sputtered, almost quit, then caught again, its rhythm changing to a sloppy, wet gurgle. It was still running, barely. I was trading fuel for seconds of life. I feathered the prop, reducing the drag, trying to turn my beautiful fighter into a clumsy glider. Every ounce of altitude was precious now. I nursed the stick, making only the slightest adjustments, feeling the plane get heavier, more sluggish. She wanted to fall out of the sky. I wouldn't let her. Through the oil-streaked canopy, I could see the shimmering line of the Oder again. The front, friendly territory, was on the other side, so close. The engine coughed, a deep, final-sounding rattle. The propeller gave a last, shuddering turn and then stopped. Silence. The ghost had arrived. The sudden, absolute quiet was more terrifying than the flak. All I could hear was the wind screaming past the holes in my fuselage. I was a falling rock. I shoved the nose down, trading altitude for airspeed, trying to stretch my glide. The treetops were coming up fast. I saw a field, a stretch of muddy earth not long enough, pitted with shell craters. It was my only chance. I lowered the landing gear. They dropped with a clunk, but the green light didn't come on. Not locked. It didn't matter. This wasn't a landing. It was a controlled crash. I wrestled with the controls, the plane mushy and unresponsive. The ground rushed up to meet me. I pulled back on the stick with all my strength at the last second, trying to flare, to bleed off that last bit of speed. The wheels touched, dug into the soft mud, and the plane slewed violently to the side. The landing gear collapsed. The left wing dipped, caught the earth, and the world became a screeching, tearing chaos of metal and dirt. My head slammed against the canopy and everything went dark. I woke to someone shaking me, a young soldier, his face full of alarm. I could smell the sweet, metallic scent of my own blood. My head was throbbing, but I was alive. And I was on our side of the river. The camera, I croaked, my throat raw. Get the film. They pulled me from the wreckage of my yak. She was a ruin. The propeller was bent into a corkscrew, the left wing was crumpled, and the engine cowling was peeled back like the lid of a tin can, revealing the mangled, oil-blackened heart of the machine. A long, wicked gash ran right through the oil cooler. The shrapnel hit. I stared at it, the wound that had almost killed us both. The film got to Zhukov. The offensive went forward 2 days later, armed with the knowledge of where to strike. They told me later it saved an entire tank brigade from annihilation. They wanted to give me a medal. They wanted to scrap my plane. I refused the first and fought against the second. That yak number 17, she had a will to live. She had carried me home when she had no right to. We had a covenant, that machine and I, a covenant of oil and steel. The ground crew, miracle workers that they were, rebuilt her. They patched the wing, straightened the fuselage, and sourced a new propeller. They put a new engine in her, a brand new heart. But the cowling, I told them to leave part of it. They took a sheet of duralumin from a wrecked Focke-Wulf and riveted it over the gash. A crude, ugly patch, a scar. For the rest of the war, as we flew over the shattered remains of the Reich and saw the red flag rise over Berlin, I flew with that scar. Other pilots had kill markings painted on their fuselages. I had my patch. It was a reminder of the silence, of the terror, and of the bond between a mechanic and his machine. It reminded me that victory isn't always clean. Sometimes you just have to hold on, patch the holes, and limp home with the thing that matters most. These memories are heavy, but they must be shared. Subscribe to ensure these stories are never forgotten.